Hello and welcome to Undercommon Taste. This is a podcast where we create and discuss homebrew content for tabletop RPGs.
Your dead, dear captain, are at least now safe from the hungry maws of the sharks.
I'm Ian Woodworth. I'm joined by my co-host James Daly, and today we have special guest Eric from the Goblin's Corner.
Woo-hoo.
Eric, welcome back to Undercommon Taste.
Hey, thanks so much, guys. Nice to be here.
Yes, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, we haven't had a chance to talk to you since you guys tackled a Tarrasque. Or
oh, yes.
went through a Tarrasque, I guess.
Yes, that was a fun journey.
My delightful Luckomancer.
Yeah. And in almost any other campaign, I feel like he would have done a whole lot better. It's just that the particulars of that encounter did not really play up to the strengths of your Luckomancer.
I 100% agree. And you know, the fun part is I've learned something valuable. In all builds, you need a fireball.
Yes, this is true. I was just happy I got to, Falcon Punch a Tarrasque in the cloaca. And I mean, how often do you get to do that?
Or who gets a chance to even say that phrase?
Exactly.
Yeah, that is very true. All right. So, Eric, we've asked you on today to join us in our ongoing series on various TTRPG biomes. This week, we're going to be talking about islands and just maritime settings in general. And the main reason why we asked you on is because I know from listening to your show that you have run at least one pirate campaign that has happened on the high seas.
Yar.
That is true, me salty dogs. I've run one or two pirate campaigns in me time.
Which is one or two pirate campaigns more than I have, because they always end up having something happen and fall apart before they get on the ocean.
Now, I will say this. Most of my pirate campaigns end up spelljamming at some point, too. Inevitably.
Oh, there is
Makes
that.
Sense. I was going to say, a pirate campaign tends to be... I've played a pirate campaign or two, and they are hard to keep focus on, and they tend to fizzle because there's just too much to do at once.
Because you can't put rails in the ocean.
This is true. Well, I mean... yeah. Well, I mean, they have the transatlantic fiber optic cord.
I think the biggest thing that you have to consider when you're doing any type of maritime or pirate campaign is that you have to understand that it's best episodic, unless you're going someplace specifically, because you're stuck on a boat, right?
Right.
And don't you ever forget. And once you know that you're on a boat, then you can have it go, okay, you're here, now you're here. Here's an encounter, or here's an island, since we're talking about island chains and stuff like that tonight. Or here's a monster that's an island, which is also just as valid.
Yeah. No, I think that does bring up a good thing. And there has been, I mean, as far as like media and shows that kind of do that well, Battlestar Galactica, the newer one, the one that came out in the 2000s, kind of did that really well. And again, you talked about going Space Jammer, but they said basically the premise of that was, a lone battleship in the ocean, kind of island hopping from point to point. And they just took that and transported it to space. But that kind of, you are on a floating thing of resource, and that's all you have until you can find a place to acquire more resource, be it food, water, supplies, ammunition, whatever it may be. You have to learn how to manage what you have, and everything is this like ongoing battle of attrition.
100%. And the best part about it is, like I said, you can have an overarching story if you want to have like some kind of big bad at the end or some kind of story arc, or you can even explore relationships on the actual ship, but you're in a confined space and you're going places. And just by that simple nature, you can do a lot of really fun narrative developments with it. And I think episodic instances is one of the best way to approach it, just because, all right, what are they going to do next week? Well, you're in a different place. Now you're doing something different, right?
It's the road trip RPG.
Absolutely. With monsters and spellcasting.
Yeah. So basically, was it Final Fantasy 15 or 16? It was one of the newer ones where you got in the car and you drove around with your buddies.
I think it was 15.
Yeah. That was an interesting take. It wasn't my favorite take for Final Fantasy, but it almost worked. I kind of liked it. It wasn't 1 or 7, but...
FFFV, Final Fantasy Fantastic Voyage with Coolio?
Yes. But as we go through, like I said, what we've been trying to do at this point is we break down our biomes. We kind of give you a feel of what you're going to find in these biomes. And then eventually we want to try to generate some random encounters if you're playing. Going with island and maritime, this is
a very broad category.
It is extremely broad, and it's kind of tricky because it is vast swaths of absolute desolate emptiness until there's not. And so even if you're island hopping, a lot of these islands are probably likely going to be unoccupied unless there's a village, or even you could have a large city on an island. You could have something like Honolulu, where you've got, a major metropolitan area, and then you hop an island or two over and it's just going to be jungle or rock or volcanic. And then when you're on the ocean, there are obviously acres and miles of just open ocean unless you're on a trading lane. And so this can be kind of weird how you want to develop your random encounters and what your players are actually going to see in these times.
I agree. I think the best way to boil this ocean is to take a little bite at it at a time. And so let's think about what exactly is an island. Well, an island could be, in a typical like pirate adventure, we're just going to go basic. You got some sand, right? It's just some sand or some land, and it could be anything from like a foot to several miles or 100 miles, right? I mean, there's a lot of big islands out there.
Yeah.
Now, the cool part is that we have magic because we play fantasy games. And so I would endeavor to have people kind of think outside the box for a lot of stuff. So you could have an island made entirely of coral, growing out of the rock. It could be a giant crab or a zaratan. If you guys don't know what a zaratan is, big ass turtle, right?
Earth elemental turtle, yes.
Yes. For that matter, it could be an earth elemental. That's it. That would be an awesome, it's just stumbling around, right? Walking across the ocean, and
you just tippy-tappy on its head. You're like, hey.
And you're right on its back, right? Riding on its head or something like that. Or it could be something exotic made of some kind of strange crystals or magical material. It could be, here's an interesting thing. No one ever thinks about this. What if it's just a hole in the ocean, and it's not necessarily an island, but it's barren of water? Like, for whatever magical reason, water does not fill in the hole, and that's the island. And so you're looking around, and at any point in time, a mile of water could come crashing down if the magic fails.
Oh, I like that. That is a wonderful concept.
It's a portal to the plane of elemental air.
Yeah.
And so just the elemental air coming through the portal has pushed the water away from it.
Just from a liminal space perspective, how eerie would that be? Like, you're sailing on the open ocean, and then there's just like a gap. The pixels have died in the Matrix, and there's just this clear, like, dark blank.
How are you going to get to the bottom of that?
Yeah, you get to the bottom of it, so you can cast some light down there and kind of look and explore, but that would be both fascinating and creepy. I love it.
And I like the idea that, if this is the location for a portal to the plane of air, you can't accidentally sail into it, because the air is pushing away sufficiently enough to where it almost has a barrier there, to where unless you are intentionally trying to breach it, it's going to just sort of bounce you off.
Oh, I like it. So it's almost like the sound barrier, where you get that like compressed air that you have to like literally shove through.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
That would be an awesome adventure. So you've got like land masses. And I think like for storytellers, the first rule is to figure out what kind of land mass it is, right? Go exotic, roll on a chart, sketch an ink blob or throw some coffee against a wall and see what splots it makes. And that's going to be the shape of your island.
I like the process that I see some people do, where you take your grid and you lay it out, and then you just take a couple fistfuls of dice and just drop it on the table, and then you just trace around the dice, and like the different colors of dice indicate different like terrain features and things of that nature.
That is an awesome. I've never heard of that, and I'm totally doing that tonight.
Yeah, it's really fun. So, like, colors can mean different things, or like the numbers that pop up on the die can mean like a lake or a valley or a mountain range. And so, yeah, you can kind of go. It's actually a fairly imaginative way to connect those. I really like that method.
Yeah.
So, again, kind of going with this. So, once we figure out these islands, well, we'll figure out why we're going to the islands. Let's finish rounding out these islands. So, yeah, we have these things. And again, these islands can be a sandy beach. They can be a jungle. They could be rocky, mountainous terrain. I love the air elemental idea. I think that is fascinating. And so it does lead to a lot of various options. But now we need a reason to kind of visit these islands. A game that does this well, kind of want to go back and reference, but Assassin's Creed Black Flag. And again, that is a full-on pirate adventure. One of the things is resource. So if you're on a boat, your party is sailing the ship, and you're sailing for 17, 14 days, unless you have a priest that's creating water, you can't drink the ocean water. So, I mean, needing to disembark to find food, medicine, water is a great reason for your party to disembark in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Got to figure out what kind of natural hazards this island has as well. right?
Yes.
If you're on a Zaratan, it could go under the water at any point in time. And you might have a flooded island. If you are on a island that's volcanic, guess what? You might get some lava in your face.
Yeah.
And then, in addition to that, you've got to consider, well, what kind of natural hazards in terms of like plants and animals. If it's a jungle, might be some jungle critters. If it's desert, you might have, I don't know, desert snakes or sand elementals, right? Because again, magic.
And a lot of times whenever you're thinking about island hopping and the islands, you're thinking along the lines of tropical islands. But you do have islands in temperate zones, so you're going to have more of your, grasslands even, or just regular temperate forests. You've got Arctic, so you could have straight up icebergs. You could have frozen islands. You could have islands with conifer forests. It runs the whole gambit.
It really does. But what's nice about this is each little biome is going to be small and isolated. So if you really kind of want to do a sampling of various biomes, and you don't necessarily want to do like a planeswalker crawl, but you want to do like a biome walker crawl, you really want to experiment with these various biomes, this kind of island hopping adventure is perfect because you can transition from one biome to the next just by sailing a few hours.
This is ripe for rolling on a random chart of environments where you just get your chart out, you roll the biome, you roll the environment, and you could even roll on a random monster chart if you want to do that instead. And that then becomes the theme of whatever that island happens to be. And then you can find the why after that. Yeah.
And if you do that, this leads itself really well to maybe you got some players that are interested in playing D&D, or you have people where they can't like set to a regular schedule, but you're going to get together and you want to do a lot of single one-shots. You could have this set up and just like pop out a one-shot. Okay, you're all on a boat, you're sailing, and you land on this island, and here's your one-shot adventure. And you come back in. If they like it and you guys want to come back, you can save those characters and save that adventure and just roll out another one-shot on another sailing adventure, or eventually you can link this up and build some sort of story arc around it.
Yeah, it gives you the opportunity to sort of dive into a West Marches style game without having to commit to the political side that you often have with a West Marches game, where the different individuals and the different groups that they're interacting with all have these interconnected political maneuverings and such. You just make it sort of episodic. Every time we come in, we're going to a different island, and we'll be finished with this island by the end of the game.
Yep. In the beginning, and this is something that DMs should consider, this is like a pro tip here, don't worry about the distances between the two islands, because you're on a sailing ship, winds can differ. Make the sailing be the speed of plot.
That is a very fair point, yes.
Yeah. The ship is a wizard. It goes precisely as fast as it needs to.
Yeah, because that way you don't have to sit there and roll on charts for encounters. You don't have to do any of that. Yeah. You get to the action when you want to have action happen. And so this is kind of falling back on like an improv trope, right? Like get to the heart of the story, because nobody wants to see the intro story and then go through all of the rigmarole, right? Like you want to get to the action immediately. You're on a ship. It's in the middle of a battle. Bam, right? You're on that. You want to get to the island to do the thing, to save the jewel, to save the world, right? So get on there, sail to it. You get there 5 days later, or you get there 6 days later, because of the winds. You can even have them roll a skill check to determine that if you like. But unless you are doing a story which is either grimdark or survival oriented, then let them be heroes, right? Let them go find, because the interesting thing is the island in that case.
Right. Now, I could see, and again, this would be for a special set of players, but if you wanted to do literally like an ocean hex crawl, that would be the only time where I would say that, obviously you'd want to manage your speed. But otherwise, yeah, absolutely. Speed of plot is a wonderful advice.
Yeah, but the thing about a hex crawl is that the mechanic of travel is part of the storytelling.
Right, and that's why I'm saying that would be the exception to that. But if you're not specifically doing a hex crawl,
I think hex crawling in a type of pirate campaign or any type of naval campaign, that's one of those things where like ship combat is definitely a good use of that.
Yes.
Maybe if you're doing like an exploration campaign where your characters are like paid to I don't know, map a certain realm. Like,
Ooh.
say you're playing the Forgotten Realms, you're mapping the Sea of Fallen Stars, right? You're maybe going through all this island chain and stuff like that. That would be a good example of something like that. But again, even that, I would say, if you're going to map it out, that's a lot of work involved for the DM, and you can even kind of fudge it.
That would be extensive.
Yeah, and even then, speed of plot trumps it.
That said, having a party of merchant marines doing a cartography run, that would be kind of fascinating. I think that has a lot of potential.
And if you're doing it as a hex crawl, a lot of hex crawls are set up as a means of discovery.
Yes.
So you don't necessarily have to have the whole map already planned out. Everybody's just rolling dice, and the map becomes whatever the dice say it is.
Oh, you could have a self-generating map. It'd be like playing the old Diablo games. Oh, I love it. Oh, okay. I'm really excited about this now because, yeah.
Your map is procedurally generated.
Oh, I love it.
Here's the best part about this, too, is that the civilizations that you're playing with in your game maybe only know a certain number of islands. These islands could have existed for thousands of years. They could have ruins on them, wizards, liches, undead monsters, beholders, and so forth, even some dragons. And they could literally just be a day's sail away, but because of the way that they've traveled for so many years, hey, look, the merchants go this particular route. Why would you ever go another route? There's not an island there until your characters stumble upon it because they got, I don't know, tossed overboard because they were trying to take the ship, or maybe some trade winds or storms kicked up and blew them off course. Now you've got another adventure.
Yeah, no, I love that. And, we're going to go ahead and reference Jim Butcher because Ian and I are both huge fans of his work. But in the Dresden Files, there is an island that is spoopy in its own right. But this island has basically a spoopy aura about it that makes people avoid it or forget it's there. And so I could easily see that with like a wizard's or necromancer's tower. So yeah, it's right off the trade route, but nobody knows it's there because for some reason, everybody just tends to go a little eastward or westward of the island, and they don't recognize that, yeah, this wizard's there and he's got his own spot and people are leaving him alone till he's ready for them not to.
That brings up a really interesting point as well. And while you're populating your island with monsters or just regular animals or whatever flora and fauna you have, give it a quirk. You don't have to give it too many. Just give it one thing that's interesting about the island. And it doesn't have to be super interesting, right? Like, that's really interesting that it's hidden. But it could just be the sand is made of iron. Or everybody that jumps off this particular crag into the ocean gets 10 hit points extra. Or they get a buff. You know what I mean? Like just one random weird thing about the island. It grows really good melons, Something that just is story-wise, not necessarily mechanically beneficial or detrimental, but something that's interesting that you can take back as lore.
No, absolutely. I love that. And I mean, really, this kind of ties into like when we do our Monster of the Week with guests, or our Monster Mash. You could do an island mash, really, and with a couple die rolls, size, biome, creature types, history or civilization type, and then a quirk, and that's just 5 really quick rolls once you get some ideas put down on the table, and the odds of 2 islands being the same would be very, very small.
Yeah, and that would be one of those things where, like with our monster mashup, you have that now let's make it weird where you roll a D100. The odds are pretty low that you're going to end up rolling the same thing on multiple islands. Not impossible, as we have shown with our monster mashup, because we've had 2 or 3 items in that 100-item list that have come up like 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
Across like 25 monsters with guests. So it's kind of disturbing how often those come up. But yeah, that is an interesting way that you could go about with that.
So you've built your islands, right? You have a bunch of random ones. You've got some quirks. You've got monsters and flora, fauna, and so forth. I think the next step for that is to start putting them together. And what I mean by that is, how do they all interconnect? Some of them may not, right? They may be lone islands. And if you want to play it like that, that's the perfect way to do just an episode of the week. But it might also be interesting to have, not all of them, but several islands connect, whether there's natives on there or monsters go back and forth. Maybe people know that if you go to this volcanic island, it has a certain type of gem, whereas over here it's got a certain type of fruit. Combined, you get some kind of magic item or something like that.
I like it. So story arc wise, I'm kind of picturing with this, and I love the prompt you gave, is maybe there is a small village or civilization and they are in an archipelago and they are connected to 4, 5, 6 other islands, and the other islands either have something like a different race or species like orcs or some sort of hostile creature. And at low tide, the islands are connected via sandbars.
Yeah.
And at low tide, things can cross over and they get raided every low tide.
Or, and here's another, just because of magic, maybe they ride a baby Zaratan across the islands. Or maybe they're interconnected by portals somewhere in like a natural cave system. A lot of options. They could even connect via the Underdark.
Oh, nice. I love the Underdark.
I mean, that was a whole big thing in, was it in 2nd edition? Whenever they had, because there were the tunnels that led to what was their also ill-contrived Mesoamerican equivalent setting.
Oh, Maztica?
Yeah, Maztica. That was almost as questionable as Oriental Adventures.
Yeah.
A lot of poor choices in that.
Yeah, it's what happens whenever you have a bunch of white guys from Wisconsin making a role-playing game and trying to incorporate all of these other cultures.
I want to say they tried and they were a product of their time.
They did try. Sometimes you should just realize your limitations and leave it for someone else.
Fair.
Some of it was interesting, some of it was cringe. And
most of it was cringe.
Yeah,
a lot of it was cringe. Yeah,
it is what it is, right?
I loved the way that, I don't know if TSR did it or if WotC did it, but the way that they canonically removed Maztica from the Forgotten Realms as a playable location is that there was a war with the dwarves and they collapsed the tunnels. They broke through the ceilings of the tunnels and they flooded it with the ocean. So you literally cannot get there anymore.
Oh, wow.
Anyway, getting back on topic.
I like this. So now our islands are interconnected. Whether they are physically connected, they're magically connected, they're connected through trade. Again, they can be part of an archipelago, just physical locations. They can be part of perhaps an empire, so they could be geopolitically connected. They could be connected via trade. They could be connected by a lot of different things. Maybe there is a type of flora or fauna that only grow on certain items, and so they are biologically connected.
Mm-hmm.
Again, going back to magical creatures, maybe these are aspects of a magical creatures, and they literally are biologically connected because they are physically part of the magical creature.
And then you just have to ask yourself, what the hell are the players doing on the open ocean, right? Well, you've got a plethora of answers at this point. They could be searching for specific spices or gold or hunting monsters, or maybe they're just trying to, guard the passage through a particularly nasty series of island chains that, are infested with Salhagen. And
it could be as simple as, we are on this landmass and we need to get to that landmass. And the only way to get there is by boat.
Yep. That is a perfectly reasonable explanation.
I think they're farming Zaratans. Baby Zaratans. They're just raising them to make new island chains.
Just, they get too big, they flush them down the toilet, and then 2,000 years later, you have a new continent.
You'd be funny I don't know why I thought of this, but it would be, I don't know, like a mountain-sized egg, and it hatches, and it's a baby Zaratan, which is a small island, right?
Yeah.
And they are purposely wrangling the baby Zaratan so that they form an island chain that moves for their entire civilization.
No,
planting
I like
trees.
Yeah. So the comical thing that just came into my head with James mentioning flushing them is so on the plane of Earth there would be a family of Dao, the Earth genies, that are basically cultivating Zaratans.
They've got pet Zaratans and they flush them down the toilet.
And that's how they dispose of the runts. They just sort of huck them into this portal, not realizing where this portal spits out.
They're tucking them right into the material plane.
Yeah, tucking them straight into the material plane.
We've always wondered where they come from.
I love it.
That's awesome.
Or maybe this particular one is sort of close to that boundary with the plane of magma, so the plane of fire. And you got a Thaqua that comes in and just sort of digs through, and a whole bunch of the little Zaratans escape.
And
they just sort of fall through a portal.
I like the idea of a land bridge that crosses one island from the other. And as the characters cross this giant land bridge, is an arc, like a big curve going over, like you say, hundreds of feet into the air, right? And as they're halfway there, they realize that the island they were on before is the skull of a dead animal.
Oh, nice, yeah.
And that this is just a giant skeleton of some colossal beast.
That is slightly terrifying, and I love it. You were talking about using the Zeratans as kind of like a movable island chain, and not to get overly political, but there are certain nations that are trying to make artificial islands and reefs to extend what they consider their territorial waters out. And so I could see someone trying to do that to maybe cut into a trade route, perhaps. Because, I mean, you have islands that are set up, and now you've got to go through maybe this bottleneck, and now they can set up some sort of like ship toll.
Speaking of ships, you could also have an entire island made of ships. That's the original Pirates alcove, right?
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. I was thinking, playing off of James's idea real quick. If you have this imperial power that realizes that some of these islands are just Zeratans that maybe are asleep, and they're trying to wake them up to move them for the purpose of expanding their territory.
Is that like trying to get the thing to move Snorlax in most of the Pokemon games?
I guess, yeah, kind of.
Wake up, get out of my way, you're blocking the path.
Yeah, you gotta get your Pokeflute.
Dude, I love Snorlax. He's among my favorites. I like this too. And so we've got these things we've got going on. So we've got why our players are out here. So now we start seeing like what kind of random encounters do you think we're going to need? I think with the maritime, we are going to lean again far more into various forms of wildlife versus humanoid or intelligent civilization encounters. But again, depending on where within the islands, or if you're on trade routes or if you're staying along the coast, that will be more likely versus far out into the open ocean. But animal-wise, again, your mammals are going to be minimal unless you're on an island. But in the open oceans, you're going to have like your sharks and your cephalopods. You'll probably have some sort of avian. What are you two thinking?
Yeah, you're going to have lots of... Once you're getting out into the open water, obviously the bulk of what you might encounter is going to be living in the water.
Yeah.
And going to be living in the water almost exclusively because the things that don't live exclusively in the water need to have somewhere that is not water to sleep.
Fair.
So that's why you don't tend to see most birds really far out away from shore, and why seeing birds is a sign that you are getting close to shore.
Now, with this, again, would very much depend on the party. This would absolutely require some session zero conversation. But if you're going to have a party and you're going to be on the ship or the boat for long periods, quote, quote, in-game time, I think at this point, some form of inter-party stress and or conflict could very easily become a random encounter in itself.
I would agree with that. I like the idea of two things. If you're playing online with friends, in between games, it's always fun to have a channel in your Discord server, or, you know, whatever you chat on, right? Even in Roll20, dedicated to all of the daily intrigues, if you're having fun with that. Maybe, I don't know, Jim, the ship's cook, is always putting that extra raisin in your bread, and you really just hate raisins. Or maybe you suspect a mutiny, right? Yeah. Maybe they've run out of rum, and when all the rum's gone, that's going to be bad.
But why is the rum gone?
Why is the rum gone? Maybe there's only one sheep
Jim the
left.
cook is the reason why the rum's gone, because he's soaking all them raisins.
Absolutely. Yeah.
See, he was trying to help you out with that extra raisin.
You know,
he was meaning well.
Anything that brings back personal relationships is always a good thing for your characters, because you want them to care about what's going on. If they're just on the ship and nothing's going on with it, they're not going to care about the ship. So if it gets attacked, they might just be like, you know what? Why are we on this ship? Let's just bail and explore this island, which is fun in itself. But if you're doing kind of a piratey adventure or even some kind of like naval adventure, you want to mostly be on the ship and use the islands as kind of the away missions.
Right. And those sorts of games, those sorts of campaigns, we've talked a lot in the past about, you know, having a base of operations for your players, a place where they can invest their money, you know, because you're getting all of this loot in all of your adventures, and you need to have some place to spend it. And there's only so many healing potions and suits of armor that you can actually buy.
Says you.
Giving the players a ship of their own is an incredible gift, and one that they will 100% blow their money on upgrading, you know, whether it flies or whether it has magical cannons. Another thing to consider also, if you're playing this type of game, is give them an island that they clear full of monsters, and now they have a home base that they can go back to.
Yeah, give them like a little pirate's alcove.
Oh,
absolutely.
They will 100% turn it into a fortress of solitude. It's great to watch them do it.
And it also gives them a reason to think about their actions, because if they lose their ship, it makes it very difficult to continue the whole pirate thing.
Generally, yeah.
It's hard to be a pirate without a boat.
You get the little water wings that kind of splash around for a little bit.
Yeah.
Not impossible, but it is difficult.
One other thing to consider also is when it comes to like naval campaigns, island games, and things like that is don't be afraid to throw ruins into it, whether it's on the island itself or even more fun, underwater.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So that reminds me of Final Fantasy 1, and it was the Opal Temple, and it was a completely underwater dungeon that you have to go through in Final Fantasy 1, and one of my favorites.
Yeah, dungeon crawls on islands are amazing because it starts off as an exploration into like a jungle or to a desolate, sandy, blasted wasteland, and then it ends up being a dungeon crawl, like a traditional dungeon crawl. And that's a lot of fun, particularly if they've done a lot of exploring on jungle islands and they've fought a bunch of beasts, or they've done something of the same thing. Throw a dungeon here and there just to kind of mix things up. It gives you the ability to throw a lot of flavor.
No, I like that. And going to with your suggestion that you've brought up several times, which is great to remember, we have magic. We can do magical things. And substituting magic for technology, you could very quickly run something like BioShock.
Yeah.
Because the whole thing was under the ocean. It was a city under the ocean. And beyond that, you could get to an abandoned, ruined city, and now you have a mystery for your players trying to figure out what the fuck happened, where'd everybody go? And you could set that up. And again, that could be a whole arc within this campaign or a one-shot or however you want to do. But that would definitely lead itself to some really compelling story.
Absolutely. And I'm going to throw one final thing in terms of islands at you guys as well. And this is something that we did in our episode on fantastical cities. It doesn't have to be on the ground. You could have an island floating in the air.
Yep. No, absolutely love that too.
And if you have a setting where they don't have airships, it becomes very interesting on how do you get there.
You better have a long grappling hook, brother.
Yeah.
That would be... Can you imagine a wizard with a familiar? He's got a raven familiar. He hands the grappling hook to the raven and a long-ass rope.
Well, he doesn't have to, because if he's up in the city, gravity is working for him. He just hucks it off the side. You just have to hope you're not standing under it.
Right.
700 feet down.
Yeah, but if you're on the boat and you got to get up there first, you're in for a climb unless you got a buddy that can fly up there and attach a rope to it.
No, I like that too. And that does give some good skill checks that, again, we don't get to use too much. And so that would be a great athletic skill check, is, yeah, sure, you've got this grappling rope ladder up there, but I mean, do you have the constitution and the strength to sit there and climb straight up for, 200 feet? So yeah, start rolling some constitution and some athletic checks.
That paladin in the armor is going to have a hard day.
Yeah, exactly. I think, seeing if your party has sea legs at various points, because the ocean is now, choppy and more tumultuous. So, roll a dexterity check. And if you fail, then you're taking a -1 to all your rolls because you're just getting tossed around all day on the ocean.
Ooh, this brings up another good point as well. Thank you for that. Weather. The weather is changeable at the drop of a hat as well.
Absolutely, yes.
And again, the weather can either change randomly by table if you want, or it can change at the speed of plot.
And weather is exponentially more dangerous on the open ocean than it is on land.
Yeah.
Because on land, the things that you're going to be hiding in are attached to the ground, and it's going to take a mighty, mighty wind to dislodge that. However, when you're on a boat in the ocean, you're not tethered to anything. At best, you're tethered to an anchor that is, attached via a stout rope or a chain to the boat. So you're going to be moving up and down, side to side, back and forth, and you run the risk of capsizing, you run the risk of, getting waterlogged, you run the risk of just drowning outright.
Yeah, Davy Jones' locker.
Because it's now the tallest thing in the vicinity, you run the risk of lightning strikes. There's a whole slew of hazards that you have on the ocean that are substantially more dangerous than they are on dry land.
I like that. So this makes me want to make a random encounter for my random encounters, but weather should absolutely be a random encounter. And with this, you could roll a d6, and for like a 1, you have like an absolute hurricane or a gale, where, something like a lightning strike would be bad. Maybe at a 1 or 2, you have a storm, and so if you roll that dexterity check, if you fail your dexterity check by more than 5, or maybe more than 10, you do potentially fall overboard. If you hit 3 or 4, you're okay. At 5, it's sweltering. Maybe you're in the doldrums and you have no movement. If you're at 6, maybe there's absolutely no wind and you're stalled and it's hot. So now you have to double your water rations for the day.
When I ran my pirate campaign, we had several weather charts. One of them was the direction the wind was blowing in. The other one was the actual weather. And then the third was magical oddities that would happen. So, for example, when they hit a doldrum, there was a chance that it would be blinding radiance instead of just the, usual sun. When a storm kicked up, are these 100-foot waves and crashing lightning natural, or is it because there's a pissed-off storm giant up in the clouds or a very hungry kraken below?
Fair. I like it.
And that's the difference. Again, you got magic, right? This is a fantasy, so these fantastical weather phenomena should be kind of epic. And that's a lot of fun, too. How do you survive a voyage to another island when things are crashing around, it's raining frogs, and there are some Sohagan breaching the deck, right? They're climbing up.
We've talked about a sea adventure. We've talked about islands. We haven't come up with, among some of the originals, sirens. Absolutely,
yes.
should have sirens.
Oh, yeah. Sirens and harpies are both suited for this particular thing.
I almost insist they be on the random encounter list.
And dragon turtles.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So do we want to go ahead and start putting together a random encounter for this one, or?
Yeah, we can. So let's go ahead and get going on that. So just to give an explanation, this is a D12 table where it's general categories by and large. Just sort of ways to prompt for the DM to develop encounters rather than providing specific encounters.
Okay.
So with that, I think a 1 would probably be a human/sentient civilization encounter, be it a pirate attack, some sort of lost treasure pulling into port, finding another ship, maybe something like a plague ship. But this, you are going to encounter other intelligent humanoids.
Okay. And another thing, 1s are almost always going to have at least the potential for strong negative consequences, whereas a 12 is going to have the potential for strong positive consequences.
Right.
So a 1, you're going to have a potentially dangerous encounter
with people. So pirates. You're getting attacked by pirates.
Pirate adventure. There we go. So a 2, I think, would be
animal adventures.
Animal adventures. I was going to say running across an unexpected island. So you do potentially hit a reef or a sandbar. You have the risk of damaging your ship depending on how the ship is being steered or guided. And then that could also lead to going onshore for an adventure.
Yeah, dex check. Roll to fall overboard.
Yeah.
And that could be a good one because you may be going over specifically to try to extract the boat so that you can continue on your adventure. And that could lead into what other things are nearby, because if you are fairly close to an island that has something like harpies on it, they are going to be aware of these sandbars out here, and they're going to be waiting for a ship to run aground so that they can take advantage of that.
There's some sea trolls that are just lurking in the rocks, ready to climb aboard and eat you.
But I could see something like you hit a sandbar, you hit a reef, you hit a rock because it's low tide, and you've now put a hole in your ship, and you've got to go onto the nearby island to gather wood for resources to patch said ship so it is seaworthy once again.
I would say a 3 would be you're stuck somewhere. And so, not necessarily dangerous, although a 3 would be deadlier than, say, a 6. So, being stuck somewhere could be you're stuck in a Sargasso, you're stuck amidst wreckage of a ship, you're
stuck in the doldrums.
Yeah, stuck in the doldrums, right? Something, you're not going anywhere. And you could even be stuck on an island. Maybe you hit a sandbar, and so you're next to an island, but your boat is stuck. Not necessarily damaged.
What if you're
but still.
politically stuck? So your party's on shore leave and your rogue gets arrested.
That would also be interesting. Stuck on Ryza, to use a Star Trek reference.
Yeah. Or, you land in port, you go ashore, you do your adventure, and when you come back, the city is under blockade.
Oh, nice. Yes.
So now you have to decide, is our ship small and fast enough to be a blockade runner?
Or your
You
ship's
get stuck
been
by
impounded.
customs. Yeah, I was going to say your ship's impounded or you're blocked by customs and they want to inspect your hold. Yes, well done.
I've got a comical one.
Okay.
Whoever loaded your ship loaded too much stuff, and your ship is just bogged down with too much crap.
Yeah, your ship is foundering.
Yes.
Yes.
How are you going to deal with that?
All right, what are we removing as ballast here?
You've got all those eggs we've been holding earlier. So what do we want for 5? I think 5.
We haven't done 4 yet.
Oh, I thought we just okay.
No, that was still us talking about 3. I think 4 needs to be a wildlife encounter. You're running into some sort of, whether it is a monstrous creature, something that is hostile or territorial, or whether it is simply an encounter that gives you an opportunity for resources, or just, something pretty to look at.
Fair.
I agree.
No, I'm with that. Whether it be, again, it could be something like mermaids, the sirens, the harpies. It could be orcas. It could just be, hey, there's a pod of whales that you're following, and maybe they're a good omen. Maybe they're killer whales and they're a bad omen and they try to sink your ship. Maybe it's a pod of shark or something along those lines. So yeah, no, I'm definitely with that.
The orcas are only going to try and sink your ship if you're sailing in a yacht.
Fair.
On the nearby cliff of a local island, you see the basilisk basking in the sun. They're sea basilisks.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah, kind of like our coastal bullets that we had the other day, or coastal onkegs.
Yeah.
Oh, very nice.
I've seen a couple of videos like this where you've had like seals and sea otters that have freaked out because there's something in the water and like it jumps up and it's like, nope, I am commandeering your ship because it's getting me out of the water, and out of the water is safe right now. And to see how your party reacts to that. And maybe it could be something cute and fuzzy like a sea otter, or maybe it is something large and potentially scary looking, but it's not trying to attack the party. It's just trying to get somewhere safe. But if the party attacks it, it'd much rather deal with the party than with whatever's in the water. So it will fight back to stay up and afloat.
To give a call back to our lycanthropes episode, were-seals.
Ooh, nice. Yes.
Very nice. So 4 is animals. 5, I think, would be good for some sort of magical phenomena.
I like it.
And that could be anything. You see a magical halo over a particular island. Follow it to the end for a pot of gold. Or maybe your ship is affected by a strange current which is pulling it towards the island for some reason. But I would say it'd be island related that has to do with some kind of magic. Maybe, it's a floating island. Or there's magma that's just erupting, and when it erupts, it turns into balloons. And it's because the volcano is actually a conduit to the plane of chaos.
Oh, okay. Again, if we want to do the island with a wizard's tower or a necromancer's tower, would be a really good pull for that as well. Again, you brought up, perhaps there is a magical aura upon the island because there are ancient ruins of a highly magical civilization.
Dungeon crawl time.
Yeah, perhaps maybe this island generates its own weather.
Maybe it's an artifact on there.
Yeah.
Or maybe
the island is the artifact. Yeah.
Or maybe there's just a wild surge or some kind of magical battle that took place. And so the entire island is either contaminated by magical radiation or it warps reality around it.
Oh, I love that. A wild surge echo. Like there was so many or such a huge wild magic surge that it echoes. And so just every once in a while, you get this random wild magical roll because of the latent magical energy still present.
Every time it casts his fireball, it turns to ice. What's going on with this place?
Yes.
Right, yeah. And I can see another reason for that would be perhaps, during some long ago battle between two magical armies, some wizard decided that they were going to open a portal to Limbo for whatever reason, because they thought it was a good idea, apparently. And whenever they realized it wasn't, they tried to close the portal, and they didn't get it all the way shut.
Ooh, okay. I like that. I'm going to kind of borrow lightly from Dragonlance, and I'm sure there's other D&D books where they use this trope, but maybe at this point they encounter a deity. Maybe it's a deity in an avatar form, so they don't realize it, but, either they see the deity at this point step down onto the island or from the island, or they come across an NPC that happens to be, one of the deities of the campaign or the realm.
I like that idea as well. I also like the idea that if it's a magical event, it could just be strong necromantic magic and you just have an island of undead.
Yeah, nope, that's perfectly acceptable as well.
Like the one guy that we talked about whenever we're talking about Kelpies, who conscripted an army of Kelpies to lure out an entire island's population into the ocean to drown them and then reanimated them all as sea zombies.
Yeah, these are all great options. And again, when you start dealing with just the islands in general, I mean, tons and tons of options, which is great.
All right, so if 5 is going to be magical phenomenon for an island, I think that 6 needs to be a magical phenomenon for out in the open water.
Okay.
Because we can still do that. It is a fantastical, magical setting. We have the means to do that. So I'm thinking things like wild magic storms out on the ocean. Even things as simple and innocuous as something like St. Elmo's fire.
Yeah.
It's as a real life phenomenon that happens, this sort of ball lightning sort of effect. What else you guys got?
I've got probably, here again, where we're going to have to do our portals to our other planes.
I was just about to say that. Yeah, portal to the plane of water is a great excuse to throw any type of water-based monster into the ship or onto the ship.
Absolutely, yeah.
We had that wonderful non-island or anti-island idea you had where it was just the portal to the plane of air, so you have that void in the ocean.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
If you're playing closer towards an Arctic area, you can have a portal to the para-elemental plane of ice.
Right.
If you are close to the para-elemental plane of salt or the quasi-elemental plane of salt, imagine that the water just starts getting more and more briny and you just see nothing but dead fish until it literally is bogging the boat down with saltbergs.
Yeah, because it's starting to crystallize and basically turning the hull of the ship into this salty rock candy looking thing.
Yeah, and it'll
I've
sink.
got 2 words for both of you.
Okay.
Sea hags.
Oh, yeah.
Just you go and you hit, maybe even it could be an underwater coven, but yeah, you hit a coven of sea hags.
I love that.
Yeah, I think sea hags would probably be more of an island encounter than an open water encounter, but you could still absolutely have them.
Okay.
There are some other things. There is a 3rd edition giantkin called an Ocean Strider.
Oh, nice, yes.
Basically, they're giants that have orca heads.
That's not terrifying at all.
This would be a great place to break out incursions in the Feywild. And what I'm thinking of, like everyone thinks, oh, okay, the Feywild, I'm in a forest. Yeah, but you could also break the Feywild on the open ocean. Think of all of the Fey-like creatures that might exist underwater. And the imagination begins to run wild.
There is an underwater Fey court.
Yeah.
There is.
I was going to say, even with that, if you didn't want to go Fey, you could go Atlantean. And again, you have a lot of magical and mythical beings that would tie in with that as well.
Oh, yeah, you've got sea elves, you've got tritons.
So I could see like the party going down and perhaps maybe they're exploring a sea wreck and they're in a diving bell and then they encounter whatever and either something comes to them in the sea bell and they are taken or they see something and decide to go exploring and discover that way.
Another fun one, and this is more of a horrible one, but fun for the DM, is maybe the water begins to turn into jelly and they realize that they're sailing through a giant gelatinous ooze of some sort, and it's an incursion from the far realm, and all manner of twisted beings are popping forth.
What if you...
That went in a different direction than I thought it was. I thought we were sailing into the plane of ooze.
Yes, I did too.
I mean, you could do that too, but this one's more fun.
Going along those lines, talking about, again, interplanar stuff, but you could definitely have something like the Bermuda Triangle and your party's trying to figure out where these vessels are going. And then, again, substituting magic for technology is really easy at that point, and you can bring in a lot of different story arcs.
And I mean, if you want to go simpler than that, it could just be random occurrences pop up, right? Yeah. So, again, we talk about wild surges. We talked about maybe it could rain specific items like gems or fruit, or, and this is a fun one, where do all the water-based spells go if they become living spells? Well, they go to the water.
Yeah.
So you're like a colony of water weirds.
Ooh, okay.
That would be interesting, especially if they're in the doldrums. And then the party would have the opportunity to maybe convince them to push the boat out of the doldrums.
Okay.
That'd be a lot of
No, I
fun.
like that. Yeah.
That'd be a diplomancy encounter.
Absolutely. We don't get enough of those.
We really don't. And again, that is one of those points of roleplay that are underutilized too often.
I think going on that, something that most people don't think about as well is 7 should maybe be some sort of puzzle. You don't get a lot of puzzles in a game. What are you trying to figure out? Now, this could be a problem, could be ship-based, it could be island-based, or even ocean-based. So what would be some ship-based problems? It could just be, oh no, the rudder broke, right? Got to fix that. Or it's springing a leak. Or maybe we have to break up our rations and split it amongst a bunch of people. Or some kind of problem is going on. We can't figure out why we can't get wind. Whereas like an island adventure type puzzle might be, I've got to figure out this lock to get inside the ruins.
Yeah, I was going to go with that for the island part. Yeah, definitely. And again, referencing back to Assassin's Creed Black Flag, they do have a handful of those which are actually quite enjoyable. For a puzzle in the ship, it could be something like a navigation puzzle, and maybe you do have to figure out a way around a shipwreck or a reef or low tides or rapids or something along those lines to get the ship safely through.
I love that idea. They find a map, maybe in another dungeon or another island, and it's encoded. And they have to figure out how to break the code, or they're going to end up having to sail through all these water hazards and a dragon turtle. And if they figure out the code, then they got smooth sailing, right? And you get experience for that. Otherwise, you got to pull yourself through and fight everything.
You see a shipwreck over on a sandbar over there, and you can tell that there are lots of reefs and sandbars and stuff between you and that boat. And you want to get there to see if there's anything worth looting on that ship. So you need to figure out how to get from where you are to there without running your ship aground and having it suffer the same fate.
No, I like that. That can lead to a lot of fun right there. That's a good adventure. I like it. I think our next one, are we up to 7 now?
That one was number 7, yeah.
Number 7. I think 8, we should have some sort of skill check, be it like a strength check or possibly a diplomacy. But I'm thinking like a strength check maybe to pull the sails in the wind to guide. Again, it could be a dexterity check, keeping your feet to see if you're thrown overboard or not.
Int check for soundings.
Yeah, check for soundings, check for diplomacy, trying to get into a harbor, maybe, again, past customs and some sort of official. So maybe you're not inspected as heavily as you're coming into port.
Perception checks would be really good for this as well.
Yeah.
So a good example of that is for one of the characters, whoever's piloting the boat, to notice whether or not rocks are coming up. Or the person at the crow's nest to make a check to see if they can see something.
Yeah, maybe if they fail their check, that leads to a chance for a random battle encounter or running aground or perhaps missing on, a magical item or a magical treasure that is available.
Knowledge checks would be very useful as well. One particularly would be nature to determine, like if I see a particular type of seagull. Oh, that's the dreaded brown seagull. Don't ever go near an island where the brown seagulls go. That's where all of the harpies roost, right? And they're known to roost with harpies or something like that. Or a magical check to determine, there's a chaos storm brewing up over in the horizon. We got to batten down the hatches because it's going to be raining slod. Don't want that happening.
Calling back to one of your island random encounters, maybe a magical check to see if you could recognize there was magic or something there so you don't pull into port into the necromancer's island that are full of, zombies and skeletons that are just on the shore waiting to flood the first thing they can get on board to. So yeah, I mean, being able to see or recognize that necromantic island, or to see if, again, to be able to recognize if there is a chaos magic storm on the horizon. Maybe with knowledge checks, nature checks, you could have some sort of, not premonition, but I can't think of the word I want. Some sort of warning that this is coming up so the party has a chance to try to avoid it.
Another good check that a lot of people don't think about is just a straight up knowledge check or some sort of check to get an insight into whether or not you're being swindled. You're selling your gear, absolutely. Or you're trying to buy gear. And it could be when you're in port or you're on an island and you're dealing with the inhabitants of the island and they're trying to you're trying to buy stuff from them, right?
Now, see, that is a skill from second and third edition I really do miss. I really encountered it for the first time, like in Neverwinter Nights, but the appraise skill, and it did, change the value that you bought and sold things for. I think that is a wonderful skill to have, and I was sad that it disappeared in later editions.
I agree. I think the skills that we have in 5e are a little limited, and you kind of have to, as a DM, give your players a little bit of creative license to mess around with some of them.
Yeah, no, I do get that. But it does also help them lean a bit more into the roleplay aspect, which is nice.
Mm-hmm.
So was that 9 or 8?
That was 7.
That was 7. Okay.
One idea for 8 would be maybe they find a survivor. Just straight up, they find a survivor. Could be anybody, right? So they find a survivor on an island. Maybe the person was stuck on the island. Maybe they find somebody afloat on a life raft or a bit of flotsam. Maybe they find them swimming in the ocean, right?
Yeah.
And it could be anybody. It could be a good person, so you have a nice encounter. Could be an NPC that might join the group. Could be a monster.
No, I absolutely love that. So I'm currently reading Count of Monte Cristo for the first time, and I know the summary of the book, but going through and certain events happen and people escape certain things, and at one point he is just off in the ocean, and the main character is picked up from a shipwreck, and he's pulled up by the boat from the hair, and they don't know what kind of person he is, and he doesn't know what kind of people rescued him. So I think, even that could lead to a random encounter for a random encounter. Is it, a noble? Are they going to be able to earn a favor from somebody important later on? Are they going to maybe find an enemy depending on how they handle this person once they bring them on board?
Mm-hmm.
Or are they going to bring them on board and try to extort them or treat them poorly? Or are they going to, give them food and water and treat them well?
I see this as the kind of like the in-city side quest where a random person approaches you and gives you a side quest. Well, instead, you're chilling in your boat. You see a shipwrecked boat that's almost about to capsize and just kind of, fall beneath the waves. Maybe it's being attacked by monsters. Maybe it's just floating there and someone's just barely surviving. They've run out of all the food and they're starving, and you rescue them, and they become now a plot point to something else. Here's a great example of, the players aren't going anywhere. Throw a shipwreck survivor in front of them, and that shipwreck survivor happens to have a map that he releases with his dying hand into the player's lap.
Yeah, I was going to say even the same thing. If they're on an island and maybe the survivor has been on the island and they came there because there is some sort of fabled ruin or treasure they thought they would be able to find, and they can't, and they enlist the party to help find this treasure. And again, that can also lead to a small dungeon or just a bunch of skill checks. Again, perception checks, athletic checks.
Yep.
See if they can dig or find or disarm any traps that might be around.
I agree. So that was 8.
Yeah, that was 8. I think 9 should be some sort of physical. Again, dealing with these islands and or with the ocean. So it can be a storm. It could be a maelstrom. It could be an earthquake. It could be a mudslide. It could be a lava flow.
So you're thinking some sort of like natural event?
Yes.
I like that.
Or it could be something along the lines of, you need to go ashore on this island, but you can't find any place on this island where you can land a boat.
Oh, also, yeah, fair.
Mm-hmm. And that ties back to a previous one with some kind of ability check, right?
Yeah.
I like this because this is more of a goal versus a check, right? So you've got a task that you have to complete, and it's kind of struggling against the natural environment. And that natural environment, by the way, isn't like natural. It could be really weird. Maybe the Zaratan sides are really slick and you got to climb up the shell to get to the forested portion.
Okay.
You find a cliff that you get to try and climb up, a la Cliffs of Insanity, and instead of the rope that Fezzik can climb up, you have these vines growing up the side of the cliff.
Mm-hmm.
And unbeknownst to the players, once they get about halfway up, it turns out that they're assassin vines.
I like it.
Those cheap little assassin vines always getting you, trying to strangle you.
I know, right?
That actually is a good segue into 10, which I was thinking would be battle. We haven't, just straight up combat, right? You're going to fight something.
Okay.
So fight on ship. Maybe there's a mutiny. Fight over the ship. Maybe there's an attack. Fight on the island. Those zombies are coming up. Just fighting something.
Yeah, no, those are fair. And again, at this point, we could have botanical monsters, magical monsters, biological or zoological or humanoid.
There's a lot of different things you could throw at. I would say if it is some sort of combat, this would be a good chart to kind of roll on the side of one of the three, right? Maybe on the ship, on the open ocean, or on the island. And then just kind of come up with as a DM, I would make a list of just a couple like possible ones. If you know you're going to a specific island and you're not there yet, you're on the open ocean, what kind of things would attack you, right? Well, that's an easy encounter roll. If you're on the ship itself and that's what it comes to, what are some possibilities for a battle on the ship? Maybe one of the players has offended somebody and you've got like ship on ship combat. Maybe instead of a duel, maybe one of the sailors is a doppelganger or a monster in disguise. That's always fun. Or he was replaced by a monster in disguise.
Ooh.
And, the battle doesn't necessarily have to be an opponent versus the players. They could be coming across a battle between two other groups.
Oh, nice.
And they just happen to come across it.
Wrong place at the wrong time.
It could be a battle between a fleet of pirates and a fleet of the Navy. It could be this battle between merfolk and Sahagin.
Yeah.
You sailing along and then all of a sudden this whirlpool shows up in the middle of the ocean without any indication of where it came from. And it's because, the Sahagin are trying to break the lines of this merfolk enclave 300 feet down under the surface.
There is a massive storm and two storm giants are kind of flying above, just right above the water, duking it out.
I was going to go in this direction as something we kind of referenced last episode when we talked about our other biome. But you could have something like a sea giant or a storm giant and something like a blue dragon, perhaps, and they are just slugging it out.
I actually had something like this in one of my last home games where whenever you break it down, you take all of the various mass forces out of it, the two entities that are backing each of these two forces that were in opposition to each other were a kraken and a brass dragon.
Ooh, nice.
An ancient brass dragon. Because both of them are immune to lightning.
Ooh.
So, and both of them have lightning abilities, so they can't actually interact with each other unless, the dragon were to get into the ocean and try to tackle the kraken in its element.
The brass dragon's going to win, though, because it's going to talk the kraken to death.
I don't know. That my kraken had a mouth on him.
Yeah, uppity kraken. So we've got a bunch of puzzles. We've got a couple diplomancy events. We need a treasure event.
Yeah, that's generally
number 12.
Number 12?
Yeah.
Okay. So
we've got 11 to pull through next.
How about a friendly encounter?
Yes, absolutely. You come across a friend, they might have supplies for your party, they might know a secret route, they might have information for your quest, but this is definitely a standby is sometimes just a good friend. Maybe they can repair your ship or patch up some wounds.
This could also be a pleasant event too. So maybe you just got off of a battle and again, some kind of planar conjunction to the positive energy plane. Now everyone's healed of 10 points of damage and you just kind of go right through it and it ends as soon as it begins.
Yeah, and again, this is one of the things we bring up. Your encounters don't always have to be negative. And again, the party does need those moments of levity because it can't be high stress all the time. You have to balance things out. So absolutely, a happy boon or friendly encounter, I am 1,000% on par for.
They find a rogue Modron just doing dog paddles in the water, and they find that it's been outfitted as a submersible Modron. And
I love Modrons.
It's been exploring the ocean, and they pick it up.
It's just slapping around with those little duck feet.
Yeah. Oh, yes, it has to have duck feet or propellers.
Yes.
It has the propeller beanie for its little trolling motor. So that it can make the sharp turns and stuff.
Yes.
I love it. I also love the idea of a tiny Slod going chaotic neutral with a pirate hat.
Okay.
And he's just sailing the open waters. Yar, me hearties.
And then, as you said, 12 is generally our treasure or our big boon. Whether you find a map to a hidden treasure, you come across a shipwreck or a ship, or maybe a nobleman giving you the last of his whatever, and he has a chest of treasure in his ship as he gives his last breath, or something super beneficial, a magical item, a boon. Maybe you get the deed to an island.
Loot and or lore.
Yes.
This could also be, if you homebrew a lot of stuff, custom spells. This would be a great way to get a custom spell.
Oh, absolutely. Good call.
you fight off another ship, or you find a ship that has taken a lot of damage and is no longer occupied, and as you're going and digging through, you find a writ to give you the authorization for becoming a privateer.
Oh, nice. Yeah, you find a letter of marque.
Yeah, letter of marque.
I'm a legitimate
Yes.
pirate now.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, this was fun.
It was fun.
Thank you, Eric, for coming over and bouncing ideas with us.
My pleasure.
It's been great. So, for our listeners who maybe don't know about you and your show, first off, shame on you. Secondly, where can we find you and your show?
We're on all of the things. So we're on iTunes as The Goblin's Corner. We are also goblinscorner.com, iTunes, Spotify. We do a weekly podcast, and we explore many of the same things that you guys do as well, which is storytelling, world building. We do a lot of D&D and other role-playing game lore. Hit us up at Goblin's Corner on all the social media.
And yours is one of the ones that I regularly listen to. So I personally am going to say, go listen to the Goblin's Corner. I wholeheartedly support this endeavor.
Absolutely.
And thank you, everyone, for listening. If you have any comments, suggestions, or ideas, send us an email, undercommontaste@gmail.com, or send us a direct message through our Discord. Come join us on Discord and chat with us. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Twitch, Blue Sky, and Mastodon. Again, we're on all of those places. I don't always post in all of those places. We are on patreon.com/undercommontaste. That's where our write-ups will go. I am still working on wrapping up our poison crafting guide. If you want to help support us financially, you can come over, become a patron, or you can go to our itch store, undercommontaste.itch.io, to pick up a copy of our liminal horror adventure Beneath the Lake or my solo RPG Forever Home.
If this is your first time listening to us, welcome. We are very glad you found us. We hope you enjoyed. You can find our other podcasts on your podcatcher of choice. We're everywhere as well. We're on iHeartRadio, iTunes, Google, Spotify. As always, give us a rating and review. This helps increase our visibility and lets us know what kind of content you want to hear more of.
Stay safe, everyone, and we will see you all again in 2 weeks.
Happy gaming.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Undercommon Taste. Our theme song is Massacre Ann, written and performed by Mary Kroll and used with permission. You can find Mary online at marykroll.bandcamp.com or on Patreon at patreon.com/Dr. Mary C. Kroll. Our logo is by David Sutherland. You can find more of David's work on deviantart.com/David Sutherland or on instagram.com/Willex_73. We'll be back in 2 weeks, so stay safe, and we'll see you then.